Hello everyone. Okay, this short video is just a review of what we discussed at the end of last night's class, which would have been, I think, October the 26th, when we were discussing the great mediation and the accelerator principle. And so I had roughly sketched on the board the cyclical nature of the economy from about 1950 forward, but it occurred to me that you might want to see the real data. So that's what I have here. So what I did is I just went to a Google search and I searched for real gross domestic product, and I found it on the St. Louis Fed's web page. So this is called FRED. This is a great source of data. It's the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank. So this is real gross domestic product. But down here, if you look underneath, you can export the actual Excel data file, which I did. So this is what you get from FRED. Now notice they have kind of a cryptic way of doing this. This is 1947, January 1st. This is April 1st, July 1st, and so forth. And what you have to realize is that the GDP data comes out quarterly. So this is the first quarter of 47, second quarter of 47, third quarter, and so forth. So I thought that was a little bit clumsy and it would be hard to plot. So I changed that, and I'll show you in a minute how I did that. And this is the GDP data over here. It's already inflation adjusted. This is real gross domestic product in billions of chained 2009 dollars. So that's just a way of saying that they have netted out the inflation of all this data as if every year is in 2009 dollars. They wouldn't have used the consumer price index to do this. They would have used the GDP deflator. So then what I did is I took this data over here and I reworked it so that it looked like this. So I have 1947, 1947.25, which would be at the end of the first quarter, end of the second quarter, end of the third quarter, and then the first quarter of 1948 and so forth. I rewrote it this way so that when I plot it out, Excel will know how to plot these things on a line. This is the data that I got right off the FRED account, and then I wanted to figure out what the growth rate was, the annualized percentage growth rate across these points, and this is how I got it. It's a little bit complicated. Let me see if I can show you what I did. Okay, so looking over here on this pad, if you remember our formula, future value equals present value times 1 plus the growth rate raised the number of years out. And you realize that the data we have is in quarter. If you divide both sides by the present value, you get future value divided by the present value equals 1 plus the growth rate raised the number of years out. And you have to realize that this is only 1/4 of a year. So how many years out is it? It's 0.25. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to deal with that 0.25 by raising both sides to the fourth power. If I raise both sides to the fourth power, then on the right side I have now 1 plus the growth rate, and on the left side I have the future value divided by the present value raised to the fourth power. Then I subtract 1 from both sides, so then I have future value divided by the present value raised to the fourth power minus 1. And then if I want to get it into percent, I multiply it by 100, and that gets it into 100% for me. So if you look at the data, let me get this little thing off of here. If you look at the data, that's exactly what I've done. I've taken the future value, which is 1932.3, divided it by 1934.5, raised it to the fourth power, subtracted 1 from that quotient, and then multiplied by 100 to get this. So what are these numbers? These are the annualized quarterly growth rate of real GDP from 1947 to the present. Okay, so this is the real data, not something I made up in the classroom last night. And you can plot that out and look at it. And this is how it looks. And you can see it's really messy, a lot messier than what I did before in class, but you can still see the great moderation which occurred right after the recession in 1982. So it started right in here and it went all the way to 2007. So this little part of the chart is obviously different from what was going on before. Before that, we had these huge swings in growth, in recessions, and then in here we had this much smaller swings. And then, of course, 2007 came and upset everything. Finally, I thought I would take a sort of rolling average. So instead of plotting every data point from each quarter, I would average each 2 quarters and generate a rolling average, and that smooths the function a little bit. You can see it here. And now it's really easy to see. You can count the recessions. There was one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure you would count that as 6 or not. 5, 6. This was a really bad one in the early 80s. See, we had one in 80 and again in 82. And there's a sort of a debate about whether this was worse than the one we had in 2007. Then we had one, you might recall, in about 1990. And then I was telling you last night in class that the one we had in about 2000 was so small that it was debated, and it caused them to change how they define recessions. If you sort of look at the trend here and see that it dipped way down, it looks like, well, we're doing way worse than we were before. But by the technical definition of 2 consecutive quarters of negative real growth, we didn't really have a recession there. So they sort of changed the definition of what a recession was. Politics got into it a little. And now a recession is defined as occurring whenever the Office of Management and Budget says we've had one. Then, of course, here's 2007. So the thing to remember here is, why did it happen? Why did we have this moderation, this great moderation in here? And we have those 3 theories that we need to discuss. One is that the Federal Reserve was well run in this period and they controlled the economy very well. You know, that's the idea that Alan Greenspan is an economic genius. The second theory was that globalization caused it to get better, but of course that doesn't explain what happened here. And the third explanation has to do with the accelerator principle, which I haven't discussed yet. Of course, the real question is what's going to happen out here? Are we going to return to a kind of oscillation that we had up until 1982, or are we going to return back to this sort of moderate oscillations that we had? Okay, so I hope you find that helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in class on Monday.